Okay, can you hear now? Still not able to hear? Great, great, great. Okay, so hi again. Sorry for the audio error here. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm just going to be adding some text to one of my pages. So I have the bare bones page started here, where we can see the image that I'm working from and a process by which the facial recognition is actually reading that still image. And so today what I want to do is I want to build off this by adding another image to this and by adding some text. So I'm going to start by adding some of the text and then add in the image as well. So I'm styling this off of many of the other pages. So if I go back to some of my other pages here, and look at the top, I have this cyan colored title. So right now, though, the working title for the next page that I'm working on is machine. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm also looking here and seeing that I've been using this pink text. So I'm actually just going to grab my text here, bring it over, and then edit it, because I know that my style sheet's pretty much the same. And as I work, if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start pulling some of the information that I have over here that I was wanting to add. So this sort of written piece that I did on the side here, I have the images inserted as text here. So my idea was actually that there wouldn't be any text other than the title before this first image. So I'm going to go ahead and move this whole line. And then begin to add my other text here. Now with this, as I go, it's just going to make a giant block of text unless I do some things to it to make it respond the way that I want it to. So I am going to be formatting this in a way that allows it to actually look similar to the way it looks on the other side. I could do pre-formatted, but there is a good chance that I'll want to change this over time, so I'm just going to clean it up here. Right now, this is only cleaning it up for my benefit. It's not actually doing anything. As we can see, it keeps updating, but that update doesn't actually change anything. So now I'm adding in my line breaks. And I'm not going to focus on getting everything 100% down in terms of looking exactly like my text on the side, because I want to see the whole page layout and kind of get a sense of what it's all going to look like before I get to that point. So for now, I just want it to be roughly in the blocks that it was in before. So if I go back over to my other page and I refresh, see that there's some things offset that I need to work on, but in general, I'm getting the layout looking similar to the way I want it to look. And this is my mapped image, which I have down here. So I'm going to add more underneath. I'm actually going to go over to my style sheet really quick. This is just going to put it all to the side here, allowing me to have it be justified the way I would like it to be justified. Still going to need to bring it to the center, but this will give me something to work with a little bit easier. So the next block of text I'm going to bring in, I'm also just going to bring in as a really large block so that it is here. And in the future, I will probably have this be pre-formatted, but for now, I just want the text there so that I can work from it. So the next thing I actually want to do is I want to add the next blank image, which I've already uploaded. So I basically need to repeat what's going on here. So because I'm not actually going to be doing any facial recognition with the first version of it, I'm just going to copy this whole thing, like the top one, bring it down. And then I have to change my image. So the images I'm working from are another set of 9, but they're 9 other faces. And so now I've got my other image. And before I actually do more text, I'm going to go ahead and add the mapped version, the facial recognition version of that. So I'm going to grab the second version here. So now we can see, if we come back over to this one, that I've got this other bit of text, which isn't quite formatted yet, but will be soon. And I have my 2 images. And now I can go into my script and actually get the facial recognition to trigger onto the second image the same way that it was triggered onto this image here. So to do that, I basically have to come in here and find everywhere that I am grabbing an image element and make sure that I am pulling it into the script. So I've already done that for panel 9, which, or 9 panel rather, which is what I labeled this image here. So I need to do the same thing for what I've labeled this image here, which in this case is panel 9 number 4, and then the div ID that I used was center 2. So I'm going to go back and make a new constant. And then basically I have to come in here and make sure that everything that I wanted to have done to the first is also happening to the second. So in order to do that, I basically have to take all of what I'm doing here and redo that same thing, but for the second version. So in order to do that, I'm basically going to take this entire situation here, and in fact, I can just take that and duplicate it down here. And I'm just going to make a new constant, which is 2. And then from there, I'm adding 2 to my variables. And I know that I have to add 2 to each of these things because I've been working with this code a lot. But what this is basically going to do when I am all done is it is going to allow me to have the facial recognition happen another time. And there is definitely some ways to go about this that would be a little more efficient in terms of coding. And once I get to a point where I'm cleaning things up, that will be one of my goals. But what I'm really interested in is kind of figuring out how to work with this as quickly as possible so I can get a view of what I'm looking at so that I can respond visually, not just technically, to what's going on the screen. So now we're getting some of that, but not all of it just yet. So we're still looking. Let's see. Great. So now we're getting all of it. And so the whole reason that I'm interested in this, and I won't go through the entirety of the text today, but I'm really fascinated by this because this image that I've created here, this composite image of my face, is taken in studio, and it's part of a process wherein I'm trying to figure out what angles of my face are actually readable as feminine by the camera, especially when my hair is back and my glasses are off. And so when I made this, what I found was that the information that I gave the system misgendered me 8 out of 9 times. And then the 9th time, my face was actually not even read as a face by the algorithm. And so I'm really fascinated by this idea of like, how could I perform my gender for a machine? Or like what is a way that I can convince an algorithm that I actually am a woman, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? And I'm fascinated by this idea too that the blue number that we have here is the confidence for whether or not it's a face at all. So you can see this as a percentage. So it's like 84%, the computer is 84% sure that in this image that's a face. So at the lowest, they're not more than 50% sure that my face is a face. Here we see that's just barely over 50%. And yeah, the facial recognition depends on the software, but some facial recognition does take into account hair, and that is one of the ways that it might determine gender, depending on the way that the data is fed in. So all of the way this functions is based on like how the system is trained, right? So if you train an AI system on a bunch of feminine faces that all happen to have long hair, then yeah, the system will actually look at and take into account hair length as part of that. Not necessarily, by any way that they're actively understanding in the way that they're coding the system, but rather in the information that they're giving it. And in this way, anyone who might have short hair, or when we think about long hair, specifically long hair in white people as like a standard for femininity, that then means that not only are you potentially misgendering people who are trans or people who simply have short hair, but people from other backgrounds, other ethnicities and skin tones and those sorts of things start to get misrecognized as well, which is where these problems really start to become pretty intense. So like right now, if I go back to the main page on my site, this is, I will talk about this image here in just a minute. So this is the same facial recognition software, and here we're seeing, as I'm talking, it vacillates between male and female, but the algorithm does reliably make a decision that I'm female more often than not, and part of that may in fact have to do with the fact that my hair is down. And with my glasses off, that might change it as well. We can see that the glasses alone have shifted that quite a bit. But even in general, the gender confidence that it has for me is usually quite low. So adding to this kind of fascination is the idea that there's not much I might be able to do to my face, but how does this look? How does this function with other faces? And so what this text, which is, again, not formatted well yet, talks about is this idea of thinking about other faces. And so I put together this collage of pictures. And as I believe I mentioned in my last live stream, we might recognize the image in the middle here of the gentleman that doesn't exist. And so all 9 of these images are actually artificial intelligence created images. So none of these are actual people. They're all composite images that were created by an artificial intelligence that was fed 70,000 different high-resolution images of faces and then asked to reproduce what a face looked like. And these are some of those outputs. And so my thought was, what happens when we think about pointing one algorithm at another? So what does it mean for one algorithm to judge whether another algorithm is actually doing its job? And so I fed these images into the facial recognition algorithm, and here we can see that in so many ways these images are read, one algorithm to another, as actually more human than me. And so in all of these images here, we're looking at more than 90%. Most of the time it drops down to 87% here. But in general, the AI recognizes these faces, these fake faces, these homogeneous faces as, or not homogeneous, but synthetic faces more often, and with higher confidence in terms of gender, in terms of emotion, right? So when we're looking at this, we could see that like 99% sure it's happy, 100% sure it's happy, 100% sure it's happy, 99% sure it's a man, 95% sure that it's a woman, 94% sure that it's a woman, and on throughout all of these. It's a really, really high percentage, the really high degree of confidence that these things, that these faces that don't actually exist do exist, and that they are in fact very reliably a certain emotion or a certain gender. And then again, if we go back up to mine, apparently in a couple of these I am 100% neutral, if that is possible, but often we see this mix of sureness here, and none of the gender recognitions all of them tend to have some level of lower percentage of confidence than the synthetic images. And so I'm really fascinated by this idea, like what can we learn from that, or like what does that mean about these images that in so many ways feel very real or feel very convincing, but I wonder if even in the fact that they're so legible to another AI system, if that legibility between those two systems might start to tell us something about the way that these systems are actually thinking about what a person is and how those things might have ramifications into the future. And so that's what this whole essay that I'm working on here is about. So the essay is a work in progress and the page is a work in progress, but I got to a point in the writing where I thought it would be good to see it visually on the screen. And so my idea here is to take a minute, pause in the actual process of writing and to start composing the visual side of the work. Because as I had kind of mentioned previously, the idea around this whole site is that there's these different pages, and that it's not necessarily that you have a linear traveling through one to the other, but that on each page there are some more concrete ideas. And so this is maybe one of the more text-heavy compositions, but the idea here is to get us to think about these rules and then how these rules actually apply to faces or not faces. And then that builds up to yet another page, which will actually invite people to make their own versions of the facial recognition drawing by bringing in their own images and physically by hand making these delineations. So that is all that I have for today. I've added, again, the second set of images and got the underlying script working. The next step will be to reformat this text, take a look at it, respond to the way the image is actually happening on screen, make some changes to size and scale, and refine that, and then add a version of it to the home page so that it's accessible for people to take a look at. Cool. Well, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and log off. It's been great to talk with you all and to do this. I really look forward to these events.